The four Beardsmen of the Bookpocalypse.
Hello.
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 Hello, hello.
How's everyone doing? We're here with Janny Wurts. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
We're not worthy, but we appreciate it.
We're not worthy, we're excited.
That's before I've opened my mouth.
Simon will only build, I'm sure.
I feel like you need very little introduction, given like your standing in the book community. But I feel like, hey, Janny, tell us about yourself. What do you do?
Everything I ever wanted to do,
Amazing.
pretty much wherever my curiosity led me, which is a lot of different directions. I'm like a box of BBs, tip it over and it goes everywhere. Well, you know, it's a big, huge, wide world out there, and there's so many fascinating things. I'm like the kid in the candy store. It's been me my whole life.
That's awesome.
Nice.
I hope to experience a fraction of what you have experienced in your lifetime.
Well, go for it.
I try.
That's all good.
You know, besides the usual writer, illustrator, I got a whole other life that's not at the desk.
Oh, and I plan to question you or plan to interrogate you about some of that stuff.
Okay.
I think that's the thing. Like normally, David does the deep dive on our guests. I think you'll.
Well, I'm trying to be respectful today. Sometimes, so Joe, hello, Joe. You know, some people
Forget that. It's Friday the 13th. We don't need respect.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to bring up. And listen, in my professional research / stock. The thing is, you're well known enough to where I didn't have to look far to find more information than I had time to parse through. And so, what I would ask you about are some things that leapt out at me. Not limited to your musical history. You're a musician.
Yeah, I am, but I don't take that one with the killer instinct like I did the writing and illustrating, because it would have made my head explode.
I feel that.
A loft full of stringed instruments. It started probably when I was 9, and my dad came home with one of those really, really $15 cheap guitars that if you put your finger on the string, it would slit you to the knuckle.
Oof.
And he said to me and my brothers, anybody who can learn to play it gets to keep it. And after 2 weeks of bloody fingertips, I was the only one still standing. So that kicked it off, and then better instruments, and then I've got some rather nice Gibson mandolins. I've got some nice guitars. I've got some hammered dulcimers upstairs, and bagpiping since probably I was 18.
Awesome.
That started because we had a
that's
pipe band in my local town that played down in the church parade and stuff.
Yeah.
And they really tried hard. Let's put it that way. When I finished high school, I had a horse at the time, and I had to sell the horse to go to college. So I took the money from selling the horse I'd trained and sent myself to Europe, because I felt I didn't have enough experience to write the books I wanted to write. Not enough life experience, had not seen enough of the world, and I knew it. So one of the stops was Scotland, and going through the pass of Glencoe, for the first time in my life, I heard a set of pipes tuned the way they were supposed to be. And it freaking put my hair on end.
Awesome.
I said, this is so incredibly awesome. So when I went to college, there was a pipe band playing at my opening ceremony, and they were local. So I marched right up to and said, where do I get lessons? And it turned out the guy who was running the library at the college was one of the pipers. And he said, go get a practice chanter and I'll teach you. And he never expected to see me again. Well, going back to the guitar, big mistake. 2 weeks later, I walk in with a practice chanter, and he expected I'd last about a week, and I was still going. So this went on for about a year until I went to my hometown, and I went to the Very Awful Pipe Band to see who I could get lessons from at home who knew how to tune pipes. And that guy said, "You're practicing way, way, way too hard for anybody here." So he sent me to Delaware. So I had to drive an hour to one of the best players in the United States at the time, one that started the Eastern U.S. Pipe Band Association, top-notch, world-class. He was from Scotland. And that's who I studied under for probably 20, 25 years.
Good grief. Is there footage online of you playing bagpipes?
There is, varying. Either they snuck up behind me and I wasn't aware they were recording, or there's a few that were recorded. But yeah, there are quite a few clips where I played at conventions or hauled a set of pipes. And if you can always find it at the head of the Dragon Con parade. And up until the pandemic, I played the head of the parade for Dragon Con every year.
Geez, I may have seen you.
Uh-huh.
Oh my gosh.
Not wearing the kilt, because
Okay.
my instructor said if you're a solo piper and you're a woman, you do not wear the military dress. You wear a skirt.
In Atlanta, in Dragon Con time, I would want to wear a skirt or less if I had an option, just because of how hot it is. And that's just a concrete everywhere, making it even hotter.
Well, Dragon Con was September. It wasn't too bad. It was 10 in the morning. It usually wasn't too bad. And I was used to it. My God, I competed in Florida in the summer.
Okay. Good
and
grief.
in Charlotte, Carolina, hot, really hot, where you just drank electrolyte all day or you keeled over. But yeah, my instructor was really a wonderful, wonderful person. I miss him terribly. But he had this thing about women wearing the kilt. And so I told him, I am not going to wear a skirt. Not happening until I make the top level of amateur.
Okay.
And so he and I had a bet. He said, when you make the top level of amateur, you are going to wear proper dress. So I did that. And I was the first person in the United States as a female solo player to go out without a kilt.
Good grief.
Now that you'll see others, but I was the first.
Someone has to be.
I take notes whenever I'm in these kind of. I'm going to be taking notes the entire time, probably, just to go find Janny playing bagpipes at the front of the Dragon Con.
That's
there was a mini con. There was a pretty good clip from a mini con. There are a few.
I mean, that's a link we definitely have to share, I think.
Joe said, speaking as a fellow Dragon Con attendee, don't wear less, David. Joe, no promises. It's hot up there. I think my first experience with bagpipes may have been at the Highland Games in Atlanta, because I'm close to there, so we would go there and we'd hear them and we'd see folks. That was the coolest thing. You'd see folks tossing capers, I guess, tossing hammers, tossing stuff. They love tossing stuff. Big old dudes, in kilts, tossing things. The bagpipers. There were the river dancers, I guess, or is that specifically Irish? I don't know.
That would be Irish, but it doesn't matter.
Okay.
They have all that, and they have Scottish dancers at those competitions too.
Yeah, and they had the falconers, the hawk trainers. They had all the claymores, people demonstrating cool weapons. Very cool. And then my next experience with bagpipes after that would have probably been from the Korn album. I don't know if you listen to any new metal from the late '90s, but Jonathan Davis plays a bagpipe. He does okay. Anyway.
Yeah.
Very cool. But the fact that you play bagpipes reminds me of all these. Sometimes I see clips of Steve Martin playing banjo. It's just a thing that you wouldn't expect unless you already knew Steve Martin is a killer banjo player, but you know him for his acting and for his stand-up.
There are a lot of people who do music in this community. Even, I mean, for a while there, World Fantasy Con used to have a concert, and you got the likes of Charles DeLint and his wife. They would play. We would get together and have pickup bands. We would get together.
Gosh, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, and then I don't know, it kind of fell by the wayside, which was too bad, because amazing talent was in the community.
John Gwynn, his whole family, they have like blues chops. He's got a stand-up bass and stuff.
No way.
Yeah,
there's the musical ability around the panel side.
Oh yeah, Daryl's a drummer. I play bass. Play around on guitar.
So it's
we're all at it.
So what's the story behind the hammered dulcimer? So I'd imagine that's a very technical instrument to play.
It isn't really. It's just a bunch of strings and you smack them with hammers, and it's good for, you don't need to read music. You can figure it out. I did a lot in the folk music scene. And so anything that was going, I would pick it up and try it. And the hammer dulcimer came my way because somebody wanted a painting, so I swapped. It's a home built.
Nice.
That's amazing.
I have a very nice home built, actually a beautiful guitar, custom, that I
Nice.
swapped for a painting. So you did it any way you could. But I was in Philadelphia at the time, and that was the home of the Philadelphia Folk Festival. And if you knew the organizers, all the musicians from the festival would gather all night long. There were barbecues that went all night long with the musicians from the festival, and you could just pop in there with a guitar and back up anybody.
Oh, that'd be cool.
And if you went to the Eagle Tavern in New York on a Tuesday night, they had a back room, and they gave free beer to musicians. And all the guys coming over from Ireland, where there were phenomenal stuff going on. And anytime you walked in with pipes, they loved it.
Absolutely. And anytime you introduce an Irishman and some alcohol, I think the most famous, well, not famous in my mind wedding that I went to was one when my wife took a friend of hers in Ireland, and the after party. I don't remember going to bed, but at some point after dinner, someone produced a guitar.
Yep, and then it went on all night.
And then the whiskey came out, and at the time I was following a rugby team, London Irish, so I knew I'd learned a lot of the songs that we'd sing during the game, so I was able to join in a couple of the songs, and away I went. But a lot of fun.
Yep, they go until they all fall over drunk.
Absolutely, until the guy playing the guitar goes to sleep.
That sounds amazing.
Pretty sure it was getting light. But yeah,
I'd be curious to know what their like threshold for a musician is to get the free beer. Because I'd fancy like maybe two beers in. I'd fancy myself quite the musician, but whether or not it'd be good enough.
I don't think they discriminated. If you came in there and you were a musician and you played something, you got free beer.
Tom, when you said threshold, you made me think. Whenever I play a show, there's a certain amount of beers that I kind of stay away from liquor when I'm playing a show, just because I can control beer a little better. And I keep enough in me to where I don't care who's looking at me off stage, but I can tell if I need to slow it down and drink water. If a song starts getting a little too hard to keep up with, I'm like, okay, it's water time. Water for about 2 songs, and then it's back to beer. There's a very fine line. I feel like it's surfing almost, to where I'm in a flow state, I guess.
You got like a row of different strength drinks in front of you when you're playing.
Oh, I do. And I usually say it between songs. I'll turn around, reach for one or the other, and I make a choice right there: beer, water, beer, water.
I'm telling you, you walk in anywhere with an instrument, you can get into some real wild times. One of the more crazy events was first year I was in college. I went to Russia.
Oh,
I
God.
went to Russia to see paintings because they had all the stuff that was looted out of Europe in World War II.
Yeah.
So you could walk into one room in one museum and see 14 Rembrandts. Can do that anywhere else. So because I took lessons from that really, really incredible teacher, he did not charge a penny. But if you showed up and you hadn't practiced, out the door.
Yeah.
So I went to Russia with my practice chanter. And here I am walking through the Kremlin, and there's a kiltie playing bagpipes in the middle of the Kremlin. And I'm going, what the heck? So I walk up and say, what are you doing here? It turns out Robert Burns is huge in Russia. And he was the ceremonial piper for Prestwick Airport. And they flew him all the way to Russia to play the pipes in the Kremlin for Robert Burns' Day. So he hears that I'm a student, and he says, Lass, where's your hotel? So he shows up at a lunch hour and makes me go through everything to make sure I was being taught properly, Lass. He couldn't fault it because, of course, my teacher was impeccable.
Yeah.
So he said he would come back later that evening. Now, this was when the Iron Curtain first loosened a little bit and you could actually visit Russia. And when you went there, there was like a little old lady sitting at a desk in front of the elevator, and she wrote down what time you came in and what time you left. What time you came in and what time you left. Well, I didn't show up for a meal. And holy crap, they interrogated me. Not only that, there was a speaker on the wall with a radio that you could not turn off. You could change the channel or change it to a blank channel, but it was always open. So they were listening to everything in that hotel room. I know because I was practicing my chanter, and some little grandmother in a bathrobe and fluffy slippers comes stomping in with this horrible look on her face, yanks the panel off the wall with a special tool and shuts it down. I was probably driving the guys with headsets in the basement straight off the wall.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
The best part, this guy shows up with 4 of his buddies that evening, and they come equipped with every kind of single malt scotch, and they throw a party in my hotel room. And my roommates from college walk in and they're like, we're leaving. All these scotch are drinking all over the room. So about 1 a.m, down the hall come these Germans singing at the top of their lungs, and they come into the room and they crash the party. So I'm sitting here going, I didn't bargain for this, the 4 Scots, but now we got 3 huge Germans that are getting drunker and drunker. This went on until one of those bastards reached out, the Germans, and started fingering my hair. It was waist length. And I pushed him off, and he tried again. And those 4 Scots got up in a body. They picked this guy up who was probably a head taller than them. They marched him straight out and threw him against the wall so loud he didn't get up. They made them all leave, every one of them, and they said, last time to be going, and they marched out like perfect gentlemen. I was there going, wow.
There must have been some very confused Russians.
Germans. Oh, downstairs. They shut the thing down, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, they're wonderful people, the Scots. Everyone that I played with in a pipe band everywhere, it was like family.
Yeah, no, it's a good part of the world. I've been up to the Highlands a bit when I lived over there, up to Skye and a few places like Mull and a few other ones. And
that's on my bucket list. My mom's was a McInnes, it's her maiden name, and so we found our clan, and I know the tartan and all that, and so I have it on my bucket list to go check it out.
Yeah, when you mentioned that pass at Glenclode, Janny, that's when you first sort of go through that, that's a sort of can't help but be moved by that geography and that land. It's a powerful place.
It's amazing. In fact, you can see a lot of the mountains on the Isle of Skye on a lot of book covers in fantasy.
Oh, for sure.
Especially the digital artists, they swipe that stuff all the time.
Yeah, well, we stayed at a cottage that you had to walk to. There was there was a track in, but you had to go across a bridge, and the bridge was 2 railway girders. So only got someone that could drive a 4-wheel drive very, very well could drive across. So it wasn't even a proper bridge. So everyone else, we put your bags in the back of the truck and hike into this fishing cottage. We had no power. It was all sort of lights and that sort of thing. And then you just hike up into the mountains and try to catch fish.
Cool.
Yeah, that was good fun.
And
then yeah.
Janny, I have to assume that's a painting of yours behind you.
Yes, it is. First ever portrait of the main character for the Wars of Light and Shadow, painted in 1976.
Good grief. It's really nice.
And the surf behind that was painted in watercolor as studies on Nantucket Island in January, which was a challenge because the watercolors kept freezing.
Oh, right.
And then I brought it back to the studio and did it over in oils.
Ah.
If you had to, so music takes a backseat to writing and art, painting. I assume painting mainly.
Yeah.
And this is a terrible question, I apologize in advance. Somebody came up to you and they were like, "All right, you have to choose writing or producing art." What would have a blade? Both.
I will quote you, Buckminster Fuller. Only insects specialize.
That's a good quote. I like that.
Why?
Yeah.
Why not go for
Like I
it?
said, terrible question.
Yeah. Bad
Well, see,
David,
it
bad
started
David.
in a less complicated way than you think. I mean, I always was drawing things, so I was constantly doodling on the side of my notebooks in school.
Me
To the
too.
point where my history teacher said A+ for the doodles, crap grade for the notes.
Similar for me.
But
Yeah.
when I had the concept for this story, most of the fantasy book covers were designed for the truck drivers in the ID business. See, what would happen is the paperbacks would go out by the crate to the independent distributors, and the guys who actually racked the books in the drugstores, in the airports, at the newsstands, all those little paperback racks that you saw growing up, which are mostly gone now, except maybe in the supermarket or a Walmart, were stocked by the truck drivers. And if they liked the cover, they would leave more books there and not strip them and bring them back. So you got all these busty ladies and all the tits and ass. The readers knew better than to believe those covers. So the distribution was run by what the truck drivers thought was cool.
Damn,
so
that's
mostly
insight.
everything in the fantasy industry at the time I conceived this story was Frank Frazetta type of tits and ass. And Frank Frazetta is a freaking genius. I've seen his originals. He's incredible as an artist, but thank you all the same. That is not my world, and that is certainly not my characters.
Mine either.
So at that point, I said, I'm going to have to learn to paint, because if I just go in there cold and they hand it off to whoever, I'm going to get some unclothed woman with a metal bra that would have stuck to her nipples. Never mind.
Yeah.
So I said, we're not doing this. So I set off to do that. And because of my education, I went to a rather experimental college where you contracted your education. You said, I'm going to accomplish this by the end of it. So I'm going to read this book. I'm going to take these courses. I'm going to do these projects, show you that I figured out how to do it. This education taught you how to learn. It taught you how to go out and find the information you needed to do anything in the world that you wanted. It's in books, it's in museums, it's in people's minds. So go get it. I mean, now we've got the internet. There's absolutely nothing you can't learn if you want to.
It's true.
It's that learning how to learn.
So I said, there's no reason I can't learn how to paint. So what did I do? I drew. I took a half a semester off from college and went to an art college and took a couple of courses, rode on the bus for 25 cents a night. So that dates me all the way downtown to take these classes. And then after that, it was go where the fantasy and science fiction illustrators are, which is the conventions. They were all hanging their work at Worldcon. They were hanging their work at the various little conventions up and down the East Coast. So I could take my crap drawing, hang it up next to a Michael Whalen or Don Mates or Carl Lundgren or anybody else who was the top of the field at that time and say, all right, where's the deficiency? And then go home and work on it some more. And then next month, hang it up again and go, okay, still not there.
Nice. Michael Whalen, that's Wheel of Time and all that kind of stuff, right?
Wheel of Time didn't exist then.
Michael Whalen, I feel like
Michael Whalen painted probably Tad Williams. He did a lot of work for Daw.
Oh, okay.
At the time.
Yeah.
He won more Hugos than anybody. You should be able, I mean, you know, he did Anne McCaffrey, The White Dragon. That's one of his most famous paintings. Now he's painting for galleries, still breathtaking work.
Oh, he's doing Brandon Sanderson's. Brandon Sanderson
I think he signed off on that. He said he was done, but if he changed his mind.
Yeah. Brilliant. Have all your covers to date been your work, Janny?
Most all of them. The occasional one not. My original cover for The Cycle of Fire in Britain was Jeff Taylor, the reason being that they wanted it to look like the Empire. And he did a brilliant cover for A Master of White Storm, so the British edition of that is still his work.
Right.
How do you get the say on how your cover, if you're traditionally published? I
didn't. I walked in and I got the guy fired off the job that they wanted. In other words, if you go in with a painting that's better than what they could hire, then what else are they going to do? There was a big fight, actually, on my first novel. They were too scared to give it to me. They had a huge fight over it. The art director wanted my cover, and the editor didn't. It was, quote, giving the author too much power for their first
Yeah.
book.
Oh, for
Heaven
sure.
forbid.
And they fought about it so long, I got a truly ugly cover because by the time they assigned it to somebody else, it was awful.
It sucks.
Then I did the second edition of that, and it was terrible because the art directed me to pieces. And at that point, I walked away and said, if they ever art direct me again, I'm going to tell them no, because they may as well hire somebody. If they're going to tell somebody to be my hands and paint something icky, hire someone else. So pretty much, I submitted what I wanted to see, and they accepted it. And at one point, when I switched publishers, they said, we want to change the look and we're going to hire another artist, and you're going to not do your covers for the next time around. And I said, okay. And so I went home and painted it anyway. And I hung it at World Fantasy, and it won Best in Show. And the editor came up and said, I think we want to buy that cover.
You're an exception to rules, I feel like.
Well, yeah, because if you don't crash the gate shuts in your face, and you just took somebody else's no for your answer.
I don't like doing that either.
And especially if at a woman at that time, I was going to crash the gate. Yeah. Sorry about that, buddy.
Are you the youngest sibling?
No, I'm in the middle.
Are they all brothers?
Oh, 2 older brothers, which beat you up, and 2 younger sisters that tattled on everything.
Rock and a hard place.
Yep, you learn to fight back. So.
And watch your back.
That too.
For sure. Politics and violence.
And read books to get away from it all. Definitely.
I'm really interested to know, like, because you went down that sort of traditional publishing route, and it sounds like it was infinitely different to how it is now. Like, I'm sure I speak for like all of us here, where we've had our time in the query trenches. You submit.
First of all, it was difficult and different because self-publishing did not exist then. They only had Vanity Press, where you paid them and they made a shitty book. And and my opinion is there were 28 publishers at the time of fantasy and science fiction.
Good Lord.
28 in the United States alone. And they didn't have to have a huge profit margin. 20% was just fine. Thank you all the same. And they didn't have computer tracking, so they expected to spend 4 books building your career. They anticipated this. They bought you in, and you were in, and they would develop you. And either you didn't pan out, but they would put the effort in.
Yeah.
And you were sold by a sales force. The internet did not exist. So people browsed books, and they bought books based on the prose inside the cover, or the picture on the cover, or word of mouth, so the exposure was bigger. Bookstores had to stock a lot of books because that's how you got found.
That was the
now
marketing.
they only stock the mainstream, the big sellers. I go to Barnes and Noble and I have to order anything I want because nothing I want is on the shelves.
Yeah.
It's all the usual stuff. Not that the usual stuff is bad. It isn't, but I've already read it, I already know I don't want to read it. So it was different. There were multiple independent bookstores that hand sold your work, hundreds of them. There was the whole ID market. So your mid-list writer went to the airports, went to the drugstore stand, because that's how they established you. The bar was always very, very high. You had to have a certain level of proficiency to get through, but that wasn't gatekeeping. It was mostly proficiency at writing.
Yeah.
And back then also, they did not have what they call now a profit and loss meeting. Now they buy by committee. They go to an acquisition meeting and they have to tell the publisher, which is running on the Harvard business model, that has to report quarterly profits to shareholders and all that bull crap. They could buy a book simply because they felt it had merit. They could just buy it. The buying editor made the choices back then.
Yeah.
They did not have to justify how much money they spent. They did not have to justify how much profit they were going to make. They could buy it because it had merit, and they could take a bit of a loss on it. And the mid-list only needed a 10% profit margin to fly, and it paid for all the bigger chances that they took. Whole different dynamic. Now we have the internet. We have opinions already in your face. We have people who can't think for themselves. They won't even browse books for their own choice. They ask everybody, what should I read next? Really? I've got these 4 books. Which one should I read next? I'm going to post on Reddit and ask.
I see that every
It's like,
single day.
why? Open the book and see which one clicks.
Yeah.
Or you
We
get told
didn't
to
have
read
this-
Malazan.
Yeah. Malazan is always the recommendation.
Well, it doesn't matter. I mean, open it up and read a bunch of it and see if it appeals. And if it doesn't, pick something
100%.
else. The whole art of browsing is gone. Everything is crowdsourced, and not only just crowdsourced,
It
it is now manipulated by the algorithm.
It is.
I miss that physical bookstore. Like,
Oh, I can't
going-
stand
no.
the idea of you go and look for books and suddenly all there's are reviews and star ratings in your freaking face. I don't want to know. I really don't care what somebody else thinks of this book. I want to read it myself and form my own opinion and then go discuss it.
no.
Because
Yeah,
now
we-
it's between me and the words and my experience, my individuality, and now I can share what I think. But the idea of sharing what you think before you even touch the book, get out of here.
Yeah.
Goodreads.
But I'm
that's-
old-fashioned.
Goodreads does that. Goodreads there are books that don't exist that have thousands of reviews and ratings. And I hate to always bring up Pat Rothfuss, but The Doors of Stone, the third book in his duology, it has thousands of reviews on it. Why?
Well,
Why is
it's
that
their
even-
slop, and nobody. I mean, I hate the fact that the algorithm buries books.
Yeah.
Before the internet, there are so many books that would fit right into quote unquote modern audiences because they were doing things that quote unquote books back then didn't do wrong. The imitation Tolkien books didn't do those things, but those things were being done all the way along incredibly well, and the algorithm has buried them. Buried them.
Somebody might say, in defense of the outsourcing your opinion or crowdsourcing your opinion, crowdsourcing your taste. Someone might say, in defense of that, there are a lot more books now, possibly, than there were then, and so people don't have the time to, I don't know, search through every last one of them.
You can't search through every last one of them, but there's the read inside this book function.
There is.
And you can
It's true.
certainly test run the prose a little bit.
I do.
Yeah.
But
definitely do.
I mourn that there's some incredible books that are lost. I mean, R.M. Melick's Jerusalem Fire, I just saw it was released in audio. Now, I don't know if it just came out because they used AI audio. I have no idea, but I'm like, wow, I thought that book was just deep act sixth, and it's brilliant.
What book is it?
R.M. Melick, it's called Jerusalem Fire.
Yeah.
It's a book that's got teeth. It's a fun read, but it's also got teeth. And just came out in audio. I saw an ad for it.
When a
Passing
book has
through
teeth,
somewhere.
I want to know if my book has teeth. What gives a book teeth? Edge?
I don't know. I haven't read your book. A book that
It
has
does.
teeth to me is one that provokes thought, that you think about 20 years later.
Ooh.
It doesn't just hand you a formula and tell you who the good guy or the bad guy is, that makes you think about it, that
Cool.
presents scenarios that upside down things, you can't predict the ending, and that actually has some gristle.
A book that changes your life, in other words. Maybe.
Doesn't have to change your life, just provokes some thought, has some gristle. This is about, the Jerusalem Fire is about probably the greatest general of his age who definitively won a huge war and realized he was on the wrong side. Wrong side of history, wrong side of the ideology. And he walked away and he called himself nobody. And he started a counterinsurgency.
Historical fiction or not at all historical?
No, it's science fiction.
Nice.
Written by a woman way back in probably the 80s?
Is that why, do you think that might be why it's RM instead of like a Rachel?
Yeah, if I was going at it again, I definitely would have taken on maybe not even initials, but even a male pseudonym because it's much harder now.
Johnny Wurts.
Probably not that, but because W's down on the floor and the bigger people in the bookstore do not get down on their knees to read the W's. There's certain strikes. Back in the day I was starting, that really mattered because it wasn't internet sales.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say definitely there's a strike against getting a serious book, a seriously written, intelligent book as a woman. You're going to be running uphill. And why? Back then it wasn't an issue. That science fiction and fantasy were so small.
Yeah.
Everybody read everything, and it wasn't a big deal.
28
It wasn't a deal
publishers.
at all.
So I would imagine those publishers either closed or were inhaled by the.
They
now,
got mass merged
yeah.
because the big guys wanted more shelf space, so they took it. Yep. Yep. It used to be a handshake gentleman's business. Your book contract was 3 to 4 pages. Now it's probably 17, legal sized.
Yeah.
It's gotten insane. They're insane paragraphs that show up in a contract. One of them arrived on my desk and it said, "You are responsible for everything that you put in this book being safe," like recipes and stuff like that. And I'm going,
What?
I'm not signing this. And my agent goes, "Well, you probably are going to have to." And I said, "This is ridiculous. You cross out that paragraph and you tell them, what about fantasy fiction do you not understand?"
It's not real.
I am not taking responsibility for somebody who goes out here and takes a made-up word for a leaf and eats it outside some other, give me a break. And they said, okay, and we asked, but what's that doing in a fiction contract of any kind?
Trying to cover their ass, I guess, type stuff.
Lawyers.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a different business and it collapsed into itself. The ID market disappeared in 1 year. There's been death by 1,000 cuts steadily all the way along. What happened to the ID market was this. In the United States, there were probably 100 independent distributors, 100 guys locally who stocked the airports, the pharmacies. They knew their little region to a T. They knew what to put on the shelves and how much. So they knew how to tailor their marketplace. What happened was one decides to merge with another. What do? To raise the cash to pay for the merger and buy out the other company, they strip all the covers off the paperbacks. Now, the paperbacks that are returned without just the cover was a refund. So they strip all the stock, destroy all the stock, buy out their neighbor. Then they need to stock books for 2 IDs. What do? Buy more books. Then what do? We're going to eat this other guy over here like an amoeba. We're going to strip all the books again to pay for the acquisition. Then we're going to buy more books. 1 year, we went from over 100 IDs down to 4.
Whew.
The publishers took a massive hit, huge hit. And in order to survive, they've drastically cut back on press runs, and we've never recovered the numbers of press runs that they would put out there to take a chance. And the whole idea of returns was stupid. When it was first done, it was Ian and Betty Ballantyne's work of genius. They put the paperbacks out there like magazines, and they would usually sell out. Or at worst, within a few years, maybe 2% would come back. The return rate went from 2% to 75%. So every time a bookstore wanted to raise cash or had a poor quarter because they had shareholders, the big change, they would strip everything to make their bottom line better, and it came off the publisher's back. So you wonder why that nice little 10% profit margin where they used to take a chance on a writer disappeared and now is probably more on the neighborhood of 25%. Yeah. So we had to commercialize everything, guarantee a return to pay for all this crap that should have been got rid of a long time ago, but it couldn't be because the first publisher who decided to get rid of returns would have died in the water. And if they all moved together, antitrust laws back then would have smashed them to bits. Not like today's corruption where the antitrust doesn't do anything.
Doesn't seem to do a whole lot.
So yeah, you watch this incredible mess going on. And then you sound the sirens late in the 90s saying to the writers in Sephora, I was the liaison between the artists and the writers at that time for Sephora. Guys, you have got to put provisions in your contracts for ebooks. You got to decide right now what you want. And they're going, ebooks aren't anything yet. I said, they will be. So make your plans now. Well, they didn't do it. And now the publishers took hold and dictated terms. And the writer gets what, 25%?
Or 12.5 or yeah.
20% if you're lucky. This is wrong. It should have been the writers who took that bit in there, but they weren't forward thinking enough to listen because I was an artist, supposedly. I was a writer too. a member since '82, standing up there in front of them, telling them, pay attention, but they weren't going to do it. And then AI was coming, and nobody thought that mattered. And I put it in my contract way back in early 2000. My contract read that they weren't allowed to use AI audio for anything. My editors are going, we would never do that. I said, the hell?
Yeah.
So it's in my contract, and guess what? I've had to cut their fingers off to keep them from putting a mechanical voice on.
Yeah. I don't know how that works with fantasy anyway. Half the words in my book, I don't even know what an AI would, I guess you train it.
I just don't want it. I mean,
No,
can you
I don't
imagine
either.
if you're reading Curse of the Mistwraith, can you imagine an AI trying to make sense of that? Forget it.
It's just rubbish. I mean, you get now on your phone and you get a voicemail and it reads out, and the garbage that I get.
I'm not having it. I'm not having it. I would rather it die the big death than go out there with a machine. Sorry, no. But especially given the culture, when you read further into the series, there are things on this planet you haven't seen yet. There is no way I'm going to ever consent to AI with anything to do with those books. Not
if I wasn't hooked already, Janny, you've just given me another.
I was so far ahead of my time with some of the concepts in this book that the people who were coding and heavily reading fantasy and science fiction hated these books because I was seeing to now.
Yeah.
That's the best sci-fi. It jumps over people's head. People are like, well, that's crazy.
It was way beyond, and forgive me, but women weren't supposed to write like that.
Well, it comes to that question. I think we might have started before we formally came on board, with the series there, 11 books, which is an epic undertaking in itself, and that the mention you always knew it was going to be.
I knew exactly what I was setting out to do in 1972. It was fully evolved by 75. I refined those 30 years before I published the first book. I knew exactly where I wanted to go, but you realize that I was wading through the year of the Tolkien clones, the year of the D&D books, the Weiss and Hickman. They wanted to package it. Look at Curse of the Mistwraith's original cover. They packaged it like a D&D book. And it was just not that. And
it certainly isn't.
And you weren't going to get fantasy written at that time, read with the same kind of finesse as a Gene Wolfe book. It wasn't going to happen.
Would you say things have improved now as far as female authors in science fiction fantasy?
No.
Surely.
Nope. If we've gone backwards, and I'll tell you why. And I want to say this with a caveat that I have nothing against any writer or any reader reading what they prefer to read. It's a big tent. It's a big planet. There is room for all of it. So I don't want to have anything taken as disparagement, because I like to read fluff books too, and plenty I have. I've read junk books all my life on an airplane, on the beach, when I was a teen. I don't care. There's a book for every occasion, a book for every reader, and that's my stance. But women were not discriminated. I mean, we had Le Guin, we had McCaffrey, we had Mercedes Lackey's early work. She did diverse fiction very early on. We had a lot of women writing back then, and most of them have vanished. You don't see Andre Norton mentioned in the same breath as Asimov, but she should be. She's gone. Anne McCaffrey was the first science fiction author to make the Times bestseller list. She doesn't get the credit. Mary Shelley was the first person to write science fiction. She isn't.
Yeah, that's
so
true. Yeah.
Forget all this, but it is true. The women have always done it, and they've always, in fact, the first novel ever written was an Egyptian woman that they've ever found historically. She was in Egypt in the BC whatever. Yeah. So here's what happened. The internet came along, the algorithm came along, it picked up the big popular books, which were mass appreciated. So you got the Tolkien clones. The women didn't write the Tolkien clones. Show me one who followed in the tracks of Tolkien.
Challenge accepted.
I haven't ever found her. I would love to be proven wrong. Then what happened was we had massive success with paranormal romance and police procedurals, the Anne Rice.
Yeah.
And then came the huge successes of YA. and they were women. And women got, the algorithm grabbed that and typecast. And the men said, we don't want to read that romance stuff. And the people who were reading adult stuff, we don't want to read the YA stuff. And that's where the women were having success. And that's where I was told when the merger happened in the US and they discontinued my contract, go write YA, Janny. And I said, I don't want to write YA. And I
imagine how that went down.
don't want to write romance.
Yeah.
I'll read it. The best of any genre is worth reading. You take the 10 best of any genre, well worth reading. But I don't want to write that stuff. And I'm not disparaging the field at all.
No,
Those
I
women
agree
were
with you.
business women. They knew what they were doing and they did a phenomenal job of making a success of themselves. But I wasn't doing that, and I wasn't going to change course, and I wasn't going to give up my voice, and I wasn't going to write YA. Just plain not happening. So now we were just beginning to start to spark some distance from that, and along comes romantasy. And I'm not disparaging that, but it's true. Go to Barnes & Noble and look at how massive the YA and the romantasy shelves are.
And even in Australia, so yeah, you go to the book, the main.
Where do I fit? First of all, I don't fit. And second of all, now there's a massive prejudice. Go onto Reddit's Our Fantasy Forum, which is well run, heavily moderated, and a friendly place. But as a woman, you will still get massively downvoted there. So you're fighting algorithm, you're fighting the popular trends, you're fighting the misogyny that came in when our readership expanded from just a small niche group of people who were kind of outcast to now we got mainstream that loves fantasy and science fiction. It's great, but we brought in all the things that come with that. So I would say, yeah, I would take a male pseudonym for having written Light and Shadows in a heartbeat, because it wouldn't have been pushing uphill.
Yeah.
And I don't care. I mean, I'm going to write what I want to write. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And I'm not going to waste time over, no violence here. I don't feel sorry for myself. I'm just saying that it's pushing against the grain, and why.
Yeah.
Mm.
You made me
So
think
if there's a woman that's writing seriously deep fantasy and she wants to start out today, I would say, take a pseudonym.
What's your opinion of Robin Hobb? And never mind that Robin is a androgynous name.
There was an interview done by her editor where she mentioned that, yes, they picked, because she was Megan Lindholm before that.
Right.
Yeah.
And there is, to this day, you will go out and you will see people go, oh my gosh, I didn't know this was a woman.
Ugh.
I see it all the time. But you look in the deep dark corners of the internet, you see it.
Oh, for sure.
So yeah, that was a deliberate move.
I
didn't really even think about that till I said it out loud.
I couldn't do that because I was in the middle of a huge series. How could I change my byline?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's why.
I think there is an algorithm issue when it comes to women writers, and also to further branch out, non-binary, trans.
Totally. Now understand that Robin Hobb's work is brilliant. It deserves to be in the sun. It has earned its place. So I would never say, I wouldn't do that.
I never
a
thought
book
about
that goes out there and is still making people happy X number of years later, it achieved its goal. And that's a genius piece of work there.
Goal being torture fits, just torture fits. I wonder if that's why Margaret Ways and Tracy Hickman, I wonder if that's why, I don't know, if it's related to their,
Back then, it didn't matter. C.J. Cherry was huge when she published Gate of Vivrel. Andrea Norton was on every bookshelf you ever looked. Anne McCaffrey was massive. First woman writer to make the Times list. That was just freaking huge. So it didn't really matter in the 60s, 70s, 80s. The science fiction readers were outside the envelope anyway. We were outcasts. We were,
True.
And we read whatever. We didn't care. And if you ask anyone now who sits at a table selling books at science fiction conventions, they can see that age barrier. They say the older readers come up and they don't They don't look at who wrote the book. It's the younger ones that differentiate. So, but now those authors I just mentioned have been somewhat deep-sixed. They aren't put up on the same shelf as the Heinlein Asimov. It doesn't happen.
No.
And that's just plain wrong.
Yeah.
100%. It's funny. I forget because I'm not caring who's writing the book. If I'm liking the book, it's irrelevant to who you are or back. It's
irrelevant if you're a person that says it's irrelevant who wrote it, and you're a reader who reads it for the prose and the text, and it's irrelevant. But what isn't irrelevant is if you don't see it, it doesn't exist. If it's not visible, you can't find it. And if it's not visible enough, the algorithm is going to suppress it.
Yeah, that's the problem.
And that is the problem. It has nothing to do with will a new reader today pick up a book. They probably will, or they might if their friends kind of give them a push. Yeah. The problem is that the visibility of those books.
Don't see it. Yeah.
The wild thing about that is if I feel like I read something or saw something, or there's just this well-known statistic that women just read more than men anyway.
I didn't see that. My father read everything. He read all the time. I swiped his books. My brothers read. One of them was still dyslexic. He read slowly, but he read. So, come on, only 4% of the population buys 100% of the books anyway.
Gosh almighty. That's a sad number. It's a big population, though.
Has gaming knocked book reading down? I don't know. Look how many of whatever's selling hot off the rack right now. Court of Thorns and Roses isn't suffering from money. Readers. People read. The trick is getting them to read in the beginning to start with.
Yeah.
If reading and intellectual pursuits are not cool, and they've never been cool. I mean, now being a nerd is kind of cool if you're in the right crowd, but back then it wasn't. They threw rocks at nerds.
Yeah, I remember.
They beat you up.
Now the modern attention span doesn't lend itself that well to reading. Like everything is instant, everything is concise and tailored, like the way we consume content. So I think it's harder, and this is why I feel indie is doing better now. Because indie is the authors, in a way, like a throwback to when you first started out, Janny. It's not.
No, it's not. It's not the same because with independent, it's come a long way. It's evolved tremendously since it first started, but there is no bar.
There's not.
There is no bar. So the independent publisher, it's all on them making a standard. And then pushing that standard higher and pushing that standard higher and pushing that standard higher because they don't have the backing that we did back in the 70s or 80s, where there was an in-house editor, an in-house proofreader, an in-house copy editor. We don't have that. Even now, the editors don't have time to edit. Even if you're traditionally published now, you're not going to get what you would have gotten back then. So the indie, it's all on them, and there is no barrier to push them to go harder at it. So that means that you're going to get tremendous variability in the delivery of the story. I've almost never run across an indie book that didn't have an incredible idea, but the execution varies.
All over the place.
All over the place. And it's getting better. It is getting better, but there's still no... What do I see? I see people saying, oh, it's an indie book. I'm always going to review it nicer, kinder, because it's an indie book.
Yeah.
We have to stop doing that.
Yeah, I agree.
Because otherwise, you're not pushing those artists to do the best they possibly can. And I'm not one that says a review should be a critique of a book.
Right.
I don't believe that a review should be a critique. I don't believe reviewers running around with the attitude of, we're going to teach this author. That's really hubris. But when we don't have a standard, then we're not getting the best out of those artists.
Is there a sense then that, particularly with indie, that the ceiling is high, but the floor could be higher?
I don't know, because I don't look at indie books any differently than I do a traditionally published one. I look at it through the same eyes. As a reader, I've read thousands and thousands of books, and I'm the author of 39 short stories right now. And how many novels? 20 something? 20?
I had a count somewhere. I don't think 60.
Something like that. I'm not a fast writer, so that's a low number compared to some people's, but not every idea is worth writing. So I look at it the same way. And if I don't, first of all, rate a book, because I think a rating is useless. I will comment on the book, and I will try, if the book meets what I consider to be a solid standard, I will try to direct that book to its correct audience, which may not be me, but I will try to point the right readers to that book.
Yeah.
If I feel that that book does not meet standard, I will say nothing at all. Or if the author sent it to me as an ARC, I will write them privately and say, this is what I would have said in a public review, but I'm keeping it off the record.
Yeah.
So rather than review it too kindly, I will tell them exactly what I saw, my opinion of the execution and the delivery and the story, but it will be off the record. And that's my way of giving them what they need to hear without pulling their hopes and dreams down and embarrassing them in public. Because I sort of feel, as a writer that's been at it for so many years, my word's going to carry a little too much weight, and I don't for anything ever want to discourage somebody from pursuing what they want to do.
That's nice of you.
Yeah.
So regarding the editing and all that stuff, I don't remember what made me wonder this, but regarding grammatical issues in books, and I've seen them in a book traditionally published or indie published for as long as I can remember, but you possibly have been reading a little longer than I have, possibly. That's not any kind of comment on anyone's age here, but
I don't care. I'm older than dirt, but I'm still running around, and I can probably outdo you in the heat, so I'm not worried about it.
Yeah.
I agree. Have you noticed a trend of, this is a tough question and it's probably a useless one, but I'm just wondering are there more grammatical issues in traditionally published books now than there used to be? I don't know if you're able to answer that.
Yes, because the editing of traditional books right now is crap, because the editors are in and out of meetings. They're pushed to do all the things their superiors don't want to do, like all of the IT stuff.
Yeah.
They've reduced the staff in the editorial office down to a skeleton crew, and they're not paying them what you could feed a collie.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, the standards are gone back. When I first started publishing, if there was a typo in the book, the people who were responsible for proofreading and for copy editing would have died in their shoes. They would have been embarrassed forever. It was worth their job, they felt.
Yeah.
If they missed something.
Yeah.
So the older books, no, you don't see typos in them. But now things are being run out at high speed.
Yeah.
We're throwing around electronic files. If they burp, and we got proofreaders who don't know freaking English. I've had them change words because they didn't know the word, and their little phone dictionary didn't know the word. Or they
took a squiggly line
in my
still.
final volume of Wars of Light and Shadows, they took the word rose, meaning flower, and turned it to risen. Because they didn't fucking read the sentence. And it destroyed a build-up for 11 volumes. Are you kidding me? And this happened, so I'm like, I told them, don't change anything at the proofing unless you run it by me. They did it anyway. They did it anyway. And I have a letter in my files from my paper book days copy editor saying, 70 years or 50, 60 years in the business, they're dead now, or one of them is. We thought we knew the English language. You have the most pristine use of the English language we have ever seen. And every time we think we got a word that we didn't think you'd use wrong, we look it up in the Oxford English Dictionary, and it might be number 17, but it's there. But it's there.
That's kind of the opposite of what my copy editor told me about V&V, but
well, the whole thing is that I'm going to take their word before I take some wet behind the ears reviewer, editor, reader who doesn't know from their elbow. So, I have a standard. when I wrote Wars of Light and Shadows, I said, I am not going to pull that standard down at all. Take no prisoners. I'm going to write this book to the highest standard I possibly can. And hell take the hindmost.
And as I said, reading Kirsten this race at the moment, we mentioned, I think, before we started, the depth of the language and the vocabulary used there is, you know.
Oh, she used a reference book to learn all those words.
Yeah,
no,
it's so clever.
You don't know those words.
Yeah.
You're making me feel bad. I got as a tab on my browser, I have thesaurus.com, and it's been open for no less than 10 years. It's been, I got email. Beside that is the thesaurus. And that makes me feel a little illiterate. But
Pal, my first novel on a Royal Portable typewriter. Not even an electric typewriter. It was a manual Royal typewriter that you put the little ink spool ribbons in.
Oh gosh.
And I wrote my last novella handwritten. I literally did longhand back like I did in the 70s, and then I would type it on the Royal Portable. Because right now I feel like if somebody comes flying in claiming AI, I can go, meh. Here's a handwritten draft. I'll write it any which way, but it's like the computer is a convenience, but I didn't need it.
Well, it's a convenience, but it's also getting too smart. Now it'll tell you that you've used words incorrectly.
I turn that all off.
It oversteps.
I boot that right out. I boot that right out. I turn everything off, all the ribbons, everything. In fact, I had to call tech support when I had to change my computer and jump 10 years of operating systems because it died in the middle of 2 chapters from the end of Song of the Mysteries. It went belly up. I was fully backed. I didn't lose a thing. But suddenly I had to get the new computer up and running in the middle of this draft. And I call tech support and I say, I can't find this function. And they're going, you have all the ribbons turned off. You have all of the toolboxes turned off. I say, I don't want to stare at that garbage. I want to write.
But
he was lost. The tech guy was lost because all the little.
I just want a word processor. I want a dumb word processor.
I feel like you lose something if you write a novel or any piece of work solely on the computer. Then there's so many distractions. There's so many buttons. There's so many.
I don't have all that turned off. I have a rule that I don't have my word processor on at the same time as anything open or on. I don't even have my browser on because of backdoors in the software. So when I'm writing, everything's off, and I've cleaned all the junk off of the desktop of the computer. All that's there is my manuscript page with all the ribbons and all the little toolboxes and all the stupid things turned off. It's gone. All I see is the page.
You're smarter than I am, and stronger, I'm sure.
And it's off, so there is no buttons and temptations. It's gone. I don't keep my phone on. People don't have my cell phone number. It's in the closet. It's deep 6. We have crap service in this house anyway. I don't live on my phone.
What does a writing session look like for you? I know that's a common. So, is it regular? You sit down at some point in the AM, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then go for X amount of hours?
It's everything from waking up in the middle of the night with insomnia and doing scribbled notes with a flashlight, and then entering them the next morning, to snagging it because every time I go out on an errand, there's a pad in the car. I used to write on buses going to town to art school. Okay. I do mostly write in the studio here that you're looking at. This is my writing room. It's a mess everywhere. The screen isn't pointed.
Okay,
my usual day is get up in the morning and throw all the scribbled notes that came in the middle of the night on the desk, and then deal with feeding animals because I've got a horse out there and I've got cats and I've got, and so I'm outdoors first thing in the morning to deal with that. And then I sit down and I work. And then I check my email maybe once a day. I hate checking email. Sucks. Yeah. All those little things you go boink trash, boink trash, boink trash, boink spam.
But bane of my life, my working life, it's emails. I probably get 80 a day sometimes, and it's just...
See, I'm from the generation that you went to the mailbox once a day.
Yeah.
And a publisher might call you at 5 o'clock, and it was cool if they did. Publishers never pick up the phone now. I used to hear from my editor saddling up my horse to ride. I had a phone in the barn. Those days are gone. The human contact is gone. So all this email stuff is baloney. You send 10 emails and you could have answered that question 5 seconds in person.
Yeah.
True.
So I don't like all that garbage. I don't like my ass ringing. I don't like my sisters sending me text in the middle of the day. I love my sisters, but if I want to speak to them, I want a phone call. They don't live here. So my phone maybe is on when we have a hurricane and there's all the power is down and I'm sending a text to my family saying we ain't dead and the roof is still on.
Yeah, you make a concession in that scenario.
Right, but I don't like the constant interruption. I don't like the modern thing of no attention span. I like blocks of time. So I write in blocks of time. I read in between the cracks. And we at about, I guess I knock off about 6. I feed the animals. Then I'll go jogging or get exercise outside.
Nice.
Then we make dinner very late. It's too hot down here to eat at a reasonable hour. So it's a very Mediterranean schedule. And then we watch TV till we crash. And we don't have streaming service. So there's no binging. It's like whatever we can get on DVD. And now we have to buy it because Netflix is gone for mailing DVDs through the mail.
Yeah,
right. That is how they started.
You try explaining to my kids. I said, "Do you know Netflix used to send you DVDs?"
All the time until they croaked. We did. That was our entertainment. It was too expensive to get things any other way. Now it's cheaper to buy a DVD than, especially out of the mail catalogs, than it is to pay for high-speed internet. Plus, how many streaming services do you have to see everything you want? Mm-hmm. It's a massive outlay, and one of the reasons that I was able to finish this series on a shoestring, tailored to the way I wanted, without the readership behind me, fighting every inch of the way to keep these books even in print, was because I kept my expenses low. We have solar on the roof, so our bills, we own the property, we paid it off the moment we could. So the expenses are very, very low. The operating expenses day to day are as low as I can possibly make them.
I have noticed. I noticed early on. I said I want writing to be my. I don't want to necessarily say career or a substantial income or whatever. I wanted to cover my expenses. It occurred to me a good way to make that happen was not just to write good books and often, which I can write a book. We'll see about good or often, but it's to crush my expenses, make them less and less and less. And glad to hear you say that.
My first apartment after college cost $125 a month. It was 2 rooms of a field hand's quarters over a carriage house. The toilet floors in the winter. It was boiling hot in the summer. It was almost unlivable compared to what people are used to today. But I could go and clean stalls at 6 a.m. for a boarding stable and earn enough to pay for the rent over the course of a month. I could turn off the lights. I could skimp the heat. I turned off the hot water all summer, so I wasn't running the oil burner to heat the water. I took cold showers, whatever I could, because I realized back then I wanted to write and illustrate. That was going to be 2 full-time jobs. If I took a real job, I would get hooked on the money and I would never, ever, ever leave it behind.
A lot of people
so that
hooked on the money.
reflex of keep the expenses low so that your artistic goals can be high.
Yeah.
Stuck with me, and Don the same way. He lived in an attic apartment in an old Victorian farmhouse under a slate roof. He got up at 6 a.m. every day to paint because by 2 it was so hot all you could do was pass out. No air conditioning. And it was, floors were warm in the winter, but it was freezing cold 6 inches above the floor. So, we lived in rougher conditions. You made do because if that's what I really wanted. So yeah, crush your expenses to nothing.
Mm-hmm.
My first typewriter cost $25 at a junk sale. I paid another $20 to clean it and get it working, and that typewriter still runs. I could still write books. I do in the hurricanes. I can still write books on that.
You answered it. You had an AMA on Reddit last year, and I wish I had gotten the question. Feel like the question did not compare to your answer. Your answer was what I consider a quote. The physical challenges make a great counterpoint to the introspective concentration of writing. And it was something along the lines of, Well, I don't know what it seems.
It was
so
what did I
different.
do when I wasn't writing? I guess.
Yeah, like it seems so different
Something
to
like
write and to do this. And I've
because
always
yeah, you're taking a tiny little idea, little mental idea. You're sitting in one place and you're barely moving. You're taking this mental idea and you're building a whole world and a whole characters' lives, everything out of this tiny little idea. So what do you do when you're not doing that? Hopefully, something that's so huge and so hands-on that you can't focus on the little
Can't even
tiny
think
idea
about it.
anymore. You can only react. So you take a 16-hand horse and you point it at a 5-foot fence. You can only react to that. That animal weighs 1,000 pounds. I weigh what? 120 wringing wet? So it's a good counterpoint because it's taking you out of your brain.
Yeah.
Switch that process off. And
Right. I see a lot of authors who they try to, based on what they say online, Twitter, whatever, that, 4, 6, 8 hour writing session. And then eventually you'll see, I'm so burned out. I'm getting really burned out. And I'm thinking every day I do write. I try to write every single day, but after lunch, I'm probably outside and I don't, whether I'm pulling kayaks around or building something.
It's pumping blood back into your brain. Yeah. Have you ever heard of anything called open focus?
No.
There was a guy who was a researcher and he did huge research on how the brain works. And he came up with this open focus. And what he noticed was if he sat somebody in a chair and had them not move and look at a blackboard with a string of random numbers in front of them, and then turn the chair around, they could only recite so many. But if they looked at that same screen with those random numbers and they were jumping on a trampoline and he turned them around, they could usually recite the whole thing. And sometimes some of them could even recite it backwards. Why? Because your brain focuses better when you're in motion.
Yeah.
You know that. You get up and pace the floor. You get up and take a walk. You get up and vacuum the rug. The idea flows. You get up to go to the bathroom and suddenly, where's the pencil? We've forgotten this. When you lock yourself down in one position all day long and you focus on one stupid screen, you freeze all your ideas. Your brain cannot function in the physical world the way it was meant to. It is supposed to be intuitive. It's supposed to problem solve, but it's also supposed to do so while you're in motion.
How many times people say get out there and walk or go for a run or I run quite a bit.
Unlock, the old stupid angsty thing. I got to get up and go in a goddamn errand, and that's when the damn ideas turn on. Why? Because you got up and you moved, and it pours in.
At least half of my resolutions come from me sitting on a riding mower or me hauling sticks outside or cutting trees or whatever.
So we've forgotten this with our phones. We sit there and we lock into a screen and we just completely lose touch with how our mind works, how our body works, what makes things flow. And it's tragic.
Yeah. I said
it's scary what people don't know how to do anymore.
I said the same thing to my kids when I've got to university now, the other one's still at high school. And when they were stressing with their exams, I said, just get up. Come on, let's go for a walk, get outside.
Yeah.
I hear people moan that they don't want to read big books because my hands get tired reading a hardback. It's like, really?
Please.
Lay it on the table. Get a book stand, whatever. But, I can't stand to read a book on a screen. I really prefer a book. I like looking at the paper.
Yeah. I do the same, but unfortunately, being the other side of the world, that Australia's got terribly priced books. Like it's ridiculous how expensive our books are. So
library,
I do, and then
library.
But I do have. We can't quite see. I have. Where are we? No, wrong way. Where's my bookshelf? I can't see it now. It's over there. I've been building my collection slowly, which is much to my family's annoyance. But I said no. That's.
Back in the day, we used to swap books around too. If the library didn't have it. Yeah, we'd swap books.
I have some of my friends' books still.
The guys I run with quite regularly.
Getting them back, that was another thing. But
yeah, my friends, some of my friends have moved out of state. I still have their book, and it's my book now.
Yeah. They'll have to come find you.
But you know, it was so funny. I said, I hate reading books on a screen. You need power because just when you're about to get to the hot pot, the damn thing runs out of batteries. And the person said to me, you need power to read a paper book because you have to have a light on. I'm going, did you ever go outside in the summer and sit in the shade and read a book? I mean, all the time. People forgot, you know, daylight. I don't have a light on in this room. The big window, daylight.
Yeah, I don't have a light on. I don't have a light on in this room either.
I need to turn my lights off because it was in my defense, it was dark when I started.
Yeah, well,
I saw that.
You have a reason. I have a good light in here for when it's dark. But yeah, our whole studio I can draw on daylight.
Yeah,
because we designed the house that way.
Cool.
And do you do your art in that studio as well?
Not this studio, no. I used to when we first moved here, but we built a studio addition because there's two of us that are painting. So we have a studio specifically built. So I have a place where I paint because the oil paint's kind of messy.
Yeah.
I'm not a neat person.
My mother does the same. She's very amateur artist, but she's always been artist all her life and didn't go to art school. Should have done, unfortunately.
You don't have to go to art school.
Oh yeah, she just now paints for enjoyment with her friends and things like that. But in a house that she built an extension. The only thing she wanted to do is build this room, conservatory, lots of light, and that's where she does the painting. And it's
yeah, we didn't have the physical space for the drawing gear. For both of us, we were both working professionally, cover illustrating. We needed a good sized room to do that.
I have a question. It's off topic of what we've said, but it's definitely on the topic of Janny. That being, you had mentioned this earlier, you know, talking about that what you do physically, what you do that's not writing. Herder of bees. You herd bees.
No, I've got a beehive in back.
Okay.
So I've kept bees now since over 10 years. I was shocked when I looked at the logbook and go, oh, it's been more than 10 years. 12 now, maybe 15. So yeah, I have a beehive back there.
For honey or to shelter bees or to protect bees or?
Every time the bozos decide they're going to do something damaging to the planet, my way of keeping my sanity is to do one thing to fight back. Just one thing. It could be, I don't use my clothes dryer anymore. I hang the clothes out. That was because FPL decided that they were going to force our municipal power to sign a 30-year contract when they wanted 15. And I said, screw this. This is a tail wagging the dog, so no more dryer. That's the biggest hog in your house. So I've hung the clothes out since probably 2000 because of that. So the bees were a move because the bee industry in this country was in trouble because I'm not stupid enough to know that European honeybees are invasive. They are invasive in the United States. We had natural pollinators. They brought European honeybees, so we don't need European bees to pollinate anything if we kept our natural pollinators alive. But everybody mows their lawn and so forth. But the bee industry was killing the bees because we refused to ban the pesticides that were killing them. And they take these bees and they put them on trucks, 400 hives at a time, and they drive them across the country 4 times. In the middle of winter, they feed them sugar water. The commercial bee industry is about the cruelest, nastiest, horriblest mass farming thing you could possibly imagine.
Wow.
Hard on the bees. And now we got all these diseases that the bees are got because the practice by which they keep them doesn't keep them healthy. So I stuck a beehive in the back, and one of my neighbors knew how to keep bees. So I bought a couple of books, and what I couldn't figure out, I call them up and say, what do I do, Victor? And now I've had them long enough, I know what to do.
Give a bee suit?
And I can get honey. I don't get honey every year because if we have a drought year or a bad year, I leave it.
Yeah.
It's for them. But I do have a beehive, and I have a hand extractor made in the USA that you crank. It's stainless steel. It'll outlast me. So yeah, I can do carbon-free beekeeping.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I think it's similar in Australia because there's natural, like native bees that propagate.
Man, my friend from Australia that took us all around Alice Springs is fucking whacked.
Yeah.
I told him I was keeping bees, and he said, "Really?" And I said, yeah, I'm keeping bees. The next thing I know, he's read 3 books. He found bees in a 500-gallon drum. He goes in there and yanks this hive out of this 500-gallon drum, put it into a hive that he hand built himself. I'm like, whoa, you Australians, you're like Ukrainians. You don't mess with you guys, you know. And he's still keeping bees. So
I think it must have something to do with growing up in an environment where everything seems out to get you
Sharp.
all the time.
Sharp or venomous.
Well, Justin's a really wonderful person. We're still good friends, even though I haven't seen him.
We have a
since
healthy
I've been
respect
there,
for our nature, that's for sure.
But yeah, I was like, wow, I wouldn't be opening the top off a 500-gallon drum and pulling a wild hive out of there. Never having handled bees in my life before. That was like you got 5 balls, not just 2.
Sounds like quite a character.
Another quote. Let me just write that down real fast.
Yeah.
Another Janny quote.
Yeah, we want that in your next book, David.
I'm always looking for good quotes.
Oh, hang out with the guys who do search and rescue. Hang out with the Scots, which you already know.
I was going to
There's
talk
certain
about
places where you get the quotes.
search and rescue. I imagine, but not until you said that just then. I wanted to ask about that, but I bet that's kind of like first responders in that they have the darkest sense of humor in the world.
They do, and they need it.
Oh yeah, it's their therapy. I guess.
I think doctors and nurses are similar.
Yeah, and we mix with a lot of those first responders. Sometimes we'll be in the same, or there'll be police officers assigned to a search, or in the days when the government funds actually emergency response, we will be with the firefighters and the police and everybody else in courses where we're doing tabletop exercises. So if there's a big nasty hurricane, we'll be part of emergency management.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
In years where the government is stingy or decides these things aren't necessary, then that stuff dries up. But so yeah.
Do you respond when there are hurricanes and things? I mean, you're in Hurricane Central down there in Florida.
It's very difficult when the hurricane is actually in our area because we got our hands full repairing what we have to at our own place or dealing with the mess right in our own community. But if the hurricane is a few hours away, you know, if the eye of it goes through or the damage is a few hours away, then yeah, we're in there going house to house or supporting the people there. And it can happen as far away as a month or several months after, because they're still finding remains. I mean, we were sent across after Hurricane Dorian to the Bahamas and we were helping them with recovery a month after Dorian. And it was still a freaking mess. There was no power. There was no,
I don't think we appreciate those storms. I mean, you get a little bit in the north of straight, like the tropical, cyclones that we call them, but nothing quite like apart from I think it was early 70s Darwin, which is, I don't know if you got up there, Janny, which is right at the top of Northern Territory. It's closer to Asia than it is anywhere else.
You guys get some pretty nasty hurricanes.
Yeah, but Darwin
call them something else, but your
cyclones.
West Coast gets slammed.
Yeah,
we call West Coast.
We call them cyclones.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, wherever it hits, and they're changing. I mean, worse storms are going to different latitudes now than they ever used to, and we're going to see more of that. I mean, Hurricane Helene did a mess of damage in North Carolina. They'd never seen anything like it. They always said North Carolina is where you run away from Florida to get away from the
mountain.
hurricanes.
They're in the flooding in the mountains.
It just washed everything away, and the wind damage to the trees. It was horrific.
Yeah.
And we didn't even get hit by that one, but it wiped out the coast for storm surge. I'm not in those I'm not on the coast, and I'm not in low-lying areas that are going to be subject to that. But we have definitely gotten the eye wall of Ian. We got the eye wall of Milton that caused a mess. I've got photos up on some of my social media as to what it looked like here afterwards. But the house was built here to take it. We knew this stuff was coming. So we built it as tough as we could. And right now, the insurance rates have gotten so screwball, we had to cancel that. It was unpayable. And we said that amount of money can go into hardening the house some more. We're much smarter to take that money, thousands of dollars, and put it into hardening the house and coming through without damage than paying it to an insurance company that you're going to fight over every penny anyway.
You know, a tree.
bet.
Well, I was going to say a tree fell on my mom's house last year. Well, I guess it was about a year after my dad died, and so I'm kind of hands-on with it. And State Farm, which is just like a good neighbor, I still get triggered. I'll just put it this way. When I hear like a good neighbor, my temperature actually increases because of how hard it was to get a fucking thing done after a tree crushed her house, crushed the, no water.
And you have to wait for the adjuster, and then the adjuster puts the
them.
valuation,
They don't
and then
even
the
go
insurance
inside.
company argues with the valuation. Forget it. A tree
Yeah.
coming down on this house probably is going to cause the same amount of damage to get it fixed immediately as it would have cost to pay the premium
for years and years. You'd pay more in the insurance. You probably around here anyway. You pay more in the insurance.
You would.
Well, that's the whole insurance game. That's the business. It's designed around.
But she's been a customer, and it being my mom.
They don't care.
No, right. She's been a customer for 30-something years in that residence. A good customer, paying on time, whatever, all that.
They don't
care. They don't notice.
So we just look at it as we're keeping fire, we're keeping liability. Fire scares me more than a hurricane does.
Yeah.
And we're keeping theft.
Yeah.
Wind damage.
Trees. We got trees all around my house. There's a lot of trees in my yard, so I mean, I don't even know if it'd be an option for us to not have insurance, but they
if you have a mortgage, you have to, but we don't. We paid it off.
Yes, yeah.
We paid it off. If a tree comes down, then we cut it up.
Yeah, that's what I've been doing this week.
But most of our trees, all the big trees that we have, made it through. We had a lot of brush, but
yeah.
I'm still fit enough to handle that. We did all of our hauling away and cutting up. And then we waited. We had a couple of hanging branches that were too dangerous for us to do.
Yeah.
So we waited 2 months. And then we hired a local guy that had the license to come in and just knock them down.
Yeah.
And that's a lot cheaper than if you need it quick.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say you waited 2 months while you yourself got educated in the subtle art of climbing trees.
These needed equipment because it was definitely too high up, and it was going to be a widowmaker. You needed the guy that did it. He hired a bucket and went up and cut
that's
it
what
down.
they call the
I don't want anyone hurt doing that.
No,
we got down what we could. I mean, you can do a lot by throwing a rope on it and putting tension.
That's what that's what I do in my yard.
But there's some that you can't. It's just too dangerous, and I'm not going to see Don or me get injured.
Yeah.
It's interesting about the widowmaker, because that's what they call a lot of the gum trees in Australia are called widowmakers, because they've got some in our garden and that they're bigger. But
self-pruning trees, they'll just throw limbs at you.
They will.
Yeah. But like we had one that came down just in our garden that it was probably the size of my thigh, like 2 meters long, size of my thigh. Took out the pool fence. If it had landed on anyone, it would have been history. But conversely, in most of Sydney and probably the same rest of Australia, you can't touch a tree without going to council, needing planning permission, and they won't let you do anything.
Tell that to a hurricane.
Yeah, well, yeah. We don't get the hurricane in Sydney, so we don't quite.
It's going to prune the trees. It's going to happen.
We have fire instead, so
and it's probably venomous fire too.
Oh yeah, poisonous fire, definitely. Yeah,
full of snakes.
With snakes.
Well, they do the.
Well, y'all have the firebirds down there.
Yeah, the eagles. Yeah, they do. They
spread fire to shake out the mice or whatever.
I forget which particular bird it is, but they're known to actually drop sparks deliberately to flush their prey out.
I love that shit. That makes me want to write about monsters.
Yeah,
I do.
I forget which eagle it is, but it's one of the eagles that we have here that does something similar to that.
Pyro eagle.
Yeah. That's a good. Yeah, definitely plenty of fuel. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Definitely.
I'm going to let Don pick that up.
I was going to say, that sounds like an Australian film to me. I have another music question for you, possibly.
Sure.
When you were inspired by bagpipes, that suggests to me, well, it doesn't really suggest anything to me. It makes me curious. What kind of music did you come up on? What do you listen to when as a musician, as a young person? What affected you?
I liked what I would call art rock, things like Renaissance, things like the Moody Blues, things that had incredible harmony. I'm not a fan of jazz or blues because it depresses me. So the dissonant things, the bluesy things, just emotionally leave me ragged. I liked classical. I lived in Philadelphia, and for $2 you could get a ticket to the orchestra and to the peanut gallery, so I could listen to the Philadelphia Philharmonic every Friday for $2. That's incredible. I liked certain rock bands that I picked up, and then I liked when I got to college and I heard traditional music. Traditional Celtic music, Scottish, Irish.
Okay, yeah.
I went, where was this all my life? So I went big for that. I was always big into ballads. That was before college. Since then, I went into electronic music, which was just getting rolling when I was in college, and I had a chance to mess around in an electronic studio, which was a sales show floor for rock musicians. And I knew the guy who did the repairs and the customization for like very famous rock musicians' keyboards. So he would turn me loose on the equipment all night long. And I would just sit there and drink caffeinated tea and mess with the equipment until they opened in the morning. I've lost all the tapes of what I created at that time. But there were no polyphonic keyboards. It was all overdubbing, one track at a time. To just get a chord. But it was, and so I listen to that a lot when I'm writing. So movie soundtracks, electronic music, world music that's not in my language, folk music, Czechoslovakian music. Pretty much if it had very rich harmonies, I was into it. So does that give you an idea?
Yeah. Electronic, that makes me think dance, EDM or something. It makes me think something with a beat, but I guess electronic could be kind of anything.
Edgar Froese, Electronic Realizations for Rock Orchestra by a guy that was called Synergy. God, I got thousands of CDs.
So part of what inspired this question was one of the questions from the AMA. Hey, hi, Janny. What musician, if any, have you heard that compares with Erathon? And you
wanted a voice sampling.
The
closest I've ever heard would be Gordon Lightfoot.
Gordon Lightfoot was one of your answers.
Closest, yeah, the closest. But so I still listen to a tremendous amount of Celtic and traditional music. So I got a lot of that. There was a guy I knew that worked for the post office. He used to repair the sorting machines, the very, very complicated mail sorting machines. And he would go out. He had a very good salary. He lived in Washington, D.C. He would go out and buy every single folk album ever released back when it was vinyl. And he didn't have time to listen to them. So he would drive to Pennsylvania and leave me off crates of these albums and say, go through them and tell me which ones are worth listening to. And I had the tape recorder going 24/7. So I was into every kind of obscure original folk music in Gaelic and anything, and I still have a ton of those tapes, things people have never heard of.
Yeah, otherwise lost to time, possibly.
Well, it's all in physical media. I still have it, and when it came out on CD, I went and bought some of it, but not nearly what I've got in recordings. So yeah, and one of my favorites was oh, come on. Memory. Synergy. Mike Oldfield.
Okay.
Mike Oldfield.
Oh, yeah.
I love Mike Oldfield.
Yeah.
What an amazing guy. I mean, he could make music out of a toolbox. That was listed as one of the instruments on his album. So I had everything he ever made.
Cool.
And you never could tell what he was going to come up with next. He would transition from one kind of music right into another, and it was seamless, but you'd go, whoa, it would sit you up. So I liked a lot of stuff like that.
This is a soundtrack. Did you listen to any music when you're writing, Janny? Or
I used to constantly, all the time. I wasn't in here that I wasn't. Back in the day, I don't know if you ever heard of a Krell turntable. It was made all in brass parts, and it was made in Boston, thousands of dollars. I wore 2 of those out, and the guys who knew, and they go, "You can't wear out one of those." I said, "You can if you turn it on at 8 in the morning and you don't turn it off till you stop at midnight."
they didn't learn not to issue you that challenge.
Well, yeah, I burned up 2 of them, and then I said I really need to do cheaper equipment. This was back when I actually had an income. So now I sometimes listen to music and sometimes I don't.
Yeah. But yeah, the guys, when you're writing, are you musically fueled?
Oh yeah.
Never. I'm the exact opposite. I never have any sound on at all.
Really?
I kind of wish I could, but it would distract my brain too much.
I can't have lyrics.
No, so that's why a lot of things that are Gaelic or a lot of things that are electronic or a lot of things that are classical or a lot of movie soundtracks because there are no words.
Right.
Now I can probably write through almost anything, but sometimes I just like silence. I will use music to set a mood.
Yeah.
And I don't have the big, huge CD changer that kept automatically fixing, you know, where I'd set up for the day. I'm too lazy to bother with it. Sometimes I just come in and start writing. But yeah, I used to all the time. I used to listen to music. Now, not so much. It's not constant. And sometimes when you're really, really stuck and you just can't focus or you just can't get flowing or you just can't get that idea, I'll use a CD that's called High Focus. And it uses the tones that you have to use a headset. It uses the tones to put both hemispheres of your brain in sync.
Okay. Mm-hmm. That's pretty cool.
So when I'm really truly stuck and just nothing's working or the distractions came in too hard and fast and I want to really sink in, and then I'll turn that on and put on a headset.
And it works.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Good to know.
It puts both hemispheres of your brain in sync. So, you know, alpha wave, beta wave, theta wave, it builds it. But you have to use a headset. The Monroe Institute makes some tapes or CDs that do that. And they even made some that worked with music. It's specific tones going in one ear to the other ear. It bounces off. The one that I liked the best was High Focus. Wait a minute, and I'll tell you who made it. It's called High Focus, produced by Kelly Howell, Howell. It's 60 minutes. It sounds like white noise. It doesn't sound like anything. But it will get your brain cranking.
Reset. Yeah, that's quite helpful.
DB, do you have like a fan or something? You may not have music with lyrics or music at all, but do you have a fan or some kind of just something?
Just outside, I'll hear the birds.
I think the only sound that I have is at certain times because I live just behind a school, so suddenly thousands of children emerge.
I'll use music to cut the distractions. If Don's got a guest in or he's on the phone or there's something going on, somebody's doing construction 2 properties away and it's nail guns. We have a country property. It's got some acreage, but if they're doing something ridiculous or backup alarms because they're digging, I will put music on to cut that. And I used to use it to cut the family's conversation and get rid of it. When I wanted to read a book, you know, I don't want to listen to them. So I found it a good interference pattern. Yeah. I do it if I'm writing on a plane, I use it, or in a hotel room.
Just to create that barrier, yeah.
I think for me, when I'm writing, I do need music. It has to be theme appropriate. But when I'm reading, it has to be silence. I can't have any distractions.
Yeah,
no noise, nothing.
Yeah. And then my family asked me something. I go, "What? No, I'm not listening."
I was sitting right here. I don't have anything in my ears, but I didn't catch a word you just said. You have to.
No, I'm not with you. They're used to me. They're used to that by now.
You stupidly try to read a book at the office, and you get people saying, "Oh, what are you reading?" or talking to you about work. It's like, I'm on my break. Leave me the fuck alone.
Actually, it would certainly help if people didn't just there's just some people that just got to fill the air with conversation, even if it
Yeah.
doesn't mean anything. And
Yeah.
I do extrovert really well one-on-one or in a small group or something like this, but I am not an extrovert when it comes to crowds of people.
Yeah.
Too many people and
Yeah.
too much
Yeah.
conversation and too much social chit chat and too much. I don't know how to say it, but there's a disconnect between what's coming out of their mouths and what they're really thinking.
For sure.
Yeah.
That doesn't work for me.
I feel like that's why I dread so my band, we play shows somewhat frequently, several times, a year, I guess. And sometimes before the show, I am filled to the brim with dread, and it's never about the performance. It's about the fact that I'm going to get to this venue. We're always in town. It's a small town, so I know everybody knows everybody. Everybody's going to be a little loosened up with the drinks, and I'm going to be talking and smiling from 5 p.m. until midnight. And I think that is what I dread about shows.
Yeah.
Smiling.
More than any. I love playing music. Once I have the guitar, if I'm on stage, I'm having the time of my life. But during breaks, I duck under the crowd. I go outside. I'll go to the smoking area and I will smoke. I don't even smoke cigarettes unless I'm in a social situation. But I'll go out there just to get away from everybody talking to them.
Yeah.
That
Is me.
when the volume starts to rise and they're all talking over each other and it gets louder and
Louder
louder
and
and louder
louder.
and louder, I'm like, oh my God. I just
Yeah.
recertified for CPR and there were like 19 people in the class and it was too much. I had to put my hands over my ears because the sheer volume of noise in that room as they're all talking over each other.
Everyone's trying to
Yeah.
get louder.
I take the edge off.
That's why I hate parties.
When I get to a venue, does it help you if you take the edge off with a shot or a brew or something?
No, I just don't want to be there.
Yeah.
I'll go outside. Boom. I'll go
Yeah.
in the kitchen and wash
I'm the guy
dishes at
outside.
parties.
My wife washes dishes at parties because
Get
there's too
away
many
from
people
it.
there.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but that's me. Even if it's the family, I love them dearly. But when it
Usually
gets
the
going,
best conversations in the kitchen anyway at a party. So
Yeah.
Or outside.
I'll be washing the dishes. I don't care. Or I'll be outside. I'll slip out.
Yeah.
Or if they've got a dog, I'll be in the corner.
Hang out with the dog for sure.
Yeah.
I'll hang out with the kids. I'm the grown up hanging out with the kids, like we're running around the yard or climbing a tree, or I'm showing them what's under the rock and that kind of stuff. They're more fun than the grown ups sometimes.
I'll always pick a dog, I think.
But see, that's a hallmark of a writer. We never really truly gave up being a kid. We never grew up completely. We never accepted that you become an adult and life sucks.
I identify more with kids, and my grown up friends who all tell me life sucks. I'm like, you're doing it wrong. I don't know what not to be that guy, but I don't know. I do
because they
offer
reached
advice.
a certain age and somebody went, we're sucking all the imagination out of your head because that's for children.
Yeah.
Well, it's like you said, they fell in love with the money. I don't know if it's necessarily fell in love with money. We're not talking about rich people. We're just talking about people who rely too much on they got to have every service. They got to have every new thing. They got to have every toy or whatever. I find as much pleasure putting something on my Amazon wish list and forgetting I ever saw it. And then 3 months later, I'm like, I don't actually need that. And then I delete it. And then it
I don't even have an Amazon wish list. I guess I never subscribed to He Who Dies with the Most Toys Wins. No,
Right.
He Who Dies with the Most Worn Out Toys wins.
Well, if you're the ability to not compare your situation to other people is not one that everybody has, and that
it isn't, and that's it's really sad because
it's
in today's world, it's an essential survival.
It's a source
if you're
of so
going
much.
to not let the whole information network and people and everything that's thrown at you every day sand all your edges off. If you're not going to lose your individuality, you have got to learn to step out of the pack.
Yeah.
Don't compare to others. It's always misery. Doesn't matter whether it's.
And I grew up with 5
otherwise.
kids. The only way you got anything fun was to step out of the pack and hoard it. Because if they saw you having fun, they would beat you up and take it away from you.
That was a gladiatorial childhood there.
Yeah.
Well, we were all really motivated and most of them really intelligent and really intensely, and so when they saw something they wanted, they went for it. And so to defend yourself, you had to think fast and draw boundaries.
Are your siblings as self-made and motivated as you are?
All different. All different, but probably each in their own way, yes.
Yeah. Same ethic, but different. So the writers or no one's in the same.
Right.
No, we don't all do the same thing.
Yeah.
We've all gone our various directions, but I was lucky in my father. He was a problem solver, and I was lucky in that I had a mother who was college educated. So things like reading wasn't, my father taught me to use a screwdriver, and it was just as acceptable for me to read a book. I was hammering nails into hardwood floors at 9 years old because nobody told me I couldn't.
It reminds me of Calvin.
Want to learn to fix something? Ask Dad, he'll show you. Then when I got old enough to want things in my own right, instead of telling me, we can't afford this, what they said was, show us you can do this responsibly. Show us how you're going to pay for it. Show us how you're going to follow through. And if you come up with a good plan and you show us you can execute that plan, then go ahead. So the limitations were on us to reach up to what we wanted, as opposed to, sorry, no, you can't have this. So I think I was fortunate in that I got to create my own boundaries as I was ready for them. They didn't unreasonably say, no, we couldn't do things. I mean, if it was totally something stupid. So yeah, I sent myself to Outward Bound at 17 years old on an airplane by myself on my own money. So I did things because if you could come up with the plan and it was reasonable, they said, go ahead. Sent myself to Europe, kept a horse through my teen years. I had to work to pay for the feed. I had to figure out on books, do I need to call the vet today or not? I made all the decisions for that animal. My parents weren't horse people. But they said, you want a horse? Show us how you can pay for it. Show us how you're going to keep it. We'll throw a fence up in the backyard with, an electric fence. They're cheap. We'll throw a little shed on the back of the garage. And the rest is up to you. So I was lucky in that I did not have barriers thrown in my face except by teachers and idiots. And you learn as you grow older that filter that stuff out, because their reasons for telling you that is some desire that they had where they were told no, and they're protecting you from whatever it was they were protected from. And it's like, no.
It's a boogeyman.
It's a boogeyman.
Yeah.
And Dad's philosophy was, you've never wasted money on education or travel, because those things can never be taken away from you.
That's what my wife's dad tells her. That's I like that.
So if I wanted to go to Russia, which I did, or I wanted to go to Africa, which I did, want to go see a total eclipse of the sun, which I did, it was, you're not wasting your money doing that. But I had to mow lawns and babysit and do crap jobs, wash dishes, whatever it took to earn the money to get there.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot said for those experiences such as that make it motivate more to give them those experiences. Like when we 2 years ago, we said, okay, we'll save up, and we took them to Europe. My eldest daughter was born there, but she doesn't really remember it. And actually go and see family, go to Scotland, go to see these places, have those experiences, broaden their horizons. It's invaluable, absolutely invaluable.
Yeah, really important. But, I was privileged in that my family was in a position where I could do those things. There's so many people who are not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so where I could, I spent some time working with people who couldn't have those things. So a certain amount of my growing up was involved with volunteer work or giving back or paying forward some of what I had been given, whether it was teaching riding or building a ropes course for a summer camp that was bringing kids from a background that did not have contact with nature. So I tried to put some of what I knew back. It isn't always possible to do that, but wherever I could, I did.
Good.
And that's what actually led me into volunteering for the search and rescue team, which was, I had done offshore sailing, and I had done wilderness, and I had done land and ocean navigation, and I had done the list of things I had done fitted very nicely with what they needed. So it was a way to take that whole skill set that I acquired and keep it in use as a volunteer.
Cool.
Because I had a very, very deep background in some of the things that they would need. And not everyone who volunteers for that team has that experience coming with them.
Are there people who know you and you've had an impact on that may not even have any idea you're a writer or an artist?
Sure.
Might be a stupid question. I'm just thinking, you know, everybody I know, you know, in our circle, if you say your name, we all know author.
I played with pipe bands where they had no clue I was an author. I've gone out on searches where it took a while before they even realized what I did for a living.
Yeah.
Because it has no relevance in those settings. So,
and also, you don't seem like the bloviating, self-aggrandizing type to go, well, excuse me, I'm just an author, or, you know, whatever uppity people.
That's been kind of a, first of all, I was never like that anyway, because I'm not hollow inside. I don't need labels to say who I am. But the second thing is that stock has kind of flown the barn. Once upon a time, you couldn't just go publish a book. Once upon a time, you couldn't ask AI to do it for you.
Now any jackass can just fucking...
That's the whole point. So mostly now, saying that you're an author doesn't mean anything. You're not going to get any kudos anywhere for that profession anymore. Once upon a time, maybe, but not now.
Right.
And and probably that's how it should be anyway.
Surely.
What does it matter? There's no, whatever.
Yeah. So then, with that said, are you able to separate the art from the artist? Whenever an artist is quote unquote problematic, and yet they've produced something that the world benefited from?
We're all human beings, and show me any one of us 100 years, 200 years from now, when maybe social mores have changed.
Gosh, that's
who's not going to get tarred with some brush? Come on.
What I think about it. That's exactly how I feel about it. We're all doing something horrible right now. We're all doing in 100 years. We're all committing atrocious sins at this moment.
When it becomes a crime to kill an insect, probably.
Yeah.
By whose yardstick are you measuring?
Yeah.
If you want to pick at the flaws of everything in this world, you will find a flaw in everything, because nothing is made perfect.
Yeah.
Everything is continuously changing. Mm-hmm. So what do I think? If that person is going out in public and doing something horrible to somebody else right in front of my face, I would take it very badly if I didn't step in and say something and say, shut the hell up, or get that person to a safe place. But as far as what they wrote on paper 100 years ago,
yeah.
Do I honestly give a flying F? I don't. Do I think that their head should be on an award and that they should be stuck on a plaque or a statue? No, I don't think they deserve that. But do we pan an entire work of literature because we don't agree with what somebody thought? That's a really slippery slope.
Yeah.
It's that revisionist thing of...
So I tend to go with, how are you acting to me right here, right now? How are you treating the people around you? Are you screwing them? Are you using them for a stepping stone? Are you using them to make yourself better than everybody else? Are you causing hurt and harm by your behavior in front of me? I'm going to react. But hypothetically, I see these storms come up all the time where so-and-so did this to so-and-so, did that to so-and-so and that. And I'm like, wait a month and the story can change. So why go out there and start pointing fingers? Because there's 3 more pointing back at you. Why? So when people hit a hot issue with me, I ask, why am I reacting to it? What does that say about me?
I mean, sometimes these things are created for that very purpose, to perpetuate, to sell.
Dogpiling is really ugly, and it's mean-spirited.
But I think it also applies historically, when they retrospectively say, oh, so-and-so, was this great leader. Yeah, a lot of them were terrible people, but they're of a time when
everybody was a terrible person.
I'm not going to forgive that because we have to have a standard for now. But am I going to say, it's a slippery slope, because now we're entering the digital age. And what do? They want to go and take certain movies and make them over with AI for children. Do I think that's right? That's why I like a paper book, because you can't screw with the pixels. Do I think it's totally wrong to adjust a work a little bit so a modern artist would appreciate it? I don't know. I'm not God.
Yeah.
So it comes down to 90% of what, or 99, everything that we think is our own reaction impacting something that we've observed. So it's more not about who we're observing, it's about how we respond to it, and that is me. A review is about what I thought of a book. Somebody else's review is about what they reacted to the book. It's about them. It really isn't about me or even the book I wrote. It is their individual response. So when people go, oh, I wrote a completely balanced review, there's no such thing. We're individuals. It's all about how we react to what we're exposed to. That is me. That is not the trigger. It's how I responded to that trigger. So I try to look at what is the most kind way to handle, the old adage, is it true? Is it kind? And does it make a difference to even say anything? Sometimes saying something is not the wisest thing you could do at all. Just be quiet and let the thing run its course. Do you need to be the person who teaches that person a lesson?
Right. What's it
That's
doing?
a very tricky position to put yourself in.
Yeah.
So, is it true? Is it kind? Is it necessary? Very few things pass that bar. And so I guess that's what I would apply to, would I avoid a person's work?
Yeah.
Is it true? Is it kind? Is it necessary? Are they a mass murderer? Am I going to keep a copy of Mein Kampf on my shelf? Absolutely not.
No.
Because to me, the atrocity of that is big enough to say,
Yeah.
there's certain things I won't put into my brain. Thank you all the same. But it's really hard, when you're faced with a complex world problem. One of the things that I truly believe is it isn't that simple. It's as simple as thousands and thousands and thousands of viewpoints pouring into it. And if you're not on the ground facing it yourself, you're not going to have even the slightest degree of knowledge to even make a decision. You're going to be opinioning from the very safe sidelines.
Yep.
And sometimes in a case like that, it's like, I don't feel qualified to even make a remark. It's above my pay grade. There's too many thousands of years of history, too many thousands of years of atrocities, too many thousands of years of clashing opinions where ne'er the twain shall meet. And it's like, it makes my head spin even thinking of trying to figure it out.
Very true.
Yeah, it's the court of public opinion, isn't it? Nowadays, it seems.
And it's really easy to fly out there under a handle that isn't even your own name and not take accountability even for your own opinion. And that's a lot of the core issues of why I wrote Wars of Light and Shadow.
Yeah.
Because the news glorifies, separates, simplifies, doesn't give you the full story, ever. Never gives you the full story.
That has remained true, I'm sure, since the beginning of your career, I'd imagine.
But sitting there and having no opinion, that is just as dangerous as having too much of an opinion. So sort of there's a balance there, and it's hard to find.
Yeah.
I always like to look at someone who's a huge historical figure like General Patton. He was exactly the guy that you needed to do the job that had to get done, but you sure didn't want him at the peace table.
No.
So a strength can become a fatal weakness in the wrong circumstance.
Yeah. Well, you look at Sir Winston Churchill, great wartime leader, but problematic. Very, look at some of his opinions, but at
so
the
why
time,
why do we have one person that's expected to fill all those shoes? Why don't we have 12 people who are leaders, each with a strength that comes forward? We have a peacekeeper. We have the world has gotten so complex, and almost the idea of one person can fill that shoe, they can't. One value. If you take one value, money, Money will solve everything. Money won't solve everything. You need money. You need compassion. You need. If we had a list of 12 things on which we based our value system, the world would look a lot more balanced.
Oh, we've got just quickly aside, PL's in the chat, so we're saying hi, PL.
Oh, hi, Paul. I'm reading his book.
Awesome, right
That's
there.
my
The
current
new
read. Yep.
one.
Yep.
Ooh.
Yeah, haven't got that. I started the first one was brilliant, and again, there we go. there's a book that takes a spins things on its head. You got central character is a nasty person, but person for the time perhaps. Just very pertinent timing of.
Well, Paul's books definitely show how difficult it is to maintain a moral stance or a viewpoint, and how if it doesn't flex, it's a problem. And how people, when they flex it too much, it's a problem. So I think that's the continual. I love the way the Native Americans describe that. You go through life like a snake. You fall off balance, you fall off balance, you fall off balance, and you try to stay on that center line, but you can't. So that's all about how you fall off balance and come back into balance because of your mistakes.
Be like Wata. That might be different. Bruce Lee. Don't know what that accent was.
Paul, I am enjoying it very much. I'm just barely started. Where am I? I'm on page 55, but I'm enjoying it very much.
Getting the seal.
He knows I'm a big fan of the series. I love complex characters and complex situations in books that don't attack things simplistically.
I like that. That is a goal of mine. Is when writing. I used to think that I was going to write books, fantasy books of kind of like the video games I like to play that involved cannon fodder, orcs, goblins, whatever, just things that can die by the things that you can kill without any kind of worrying about getting your hands dirty. You go home and go to sleep at night. But then what I ended up writing, I don't even know who the good guys and bad guys are. They're just all at odds with each other, and pretty much every one of them is capable of and will do something terrible. And I don't.
But it gets quagmiry. Let's create these that we can kill, and it won't keep us up at night. But why is it okay to kill that?
And I haven't found anything yet. Not even animals. I have bad animals in my book, but I also have the falconer. He loves all animals, so he's like.
Where does it stop? You can really go down a big rabbit hole.
I'll have to write. Janny was in the comments for our talk with Paul. For anybody who doesn't know that, and I know that you're a fan of his.
Yes, that's right. It's come full circle because I think you joined the chat when we were interviewing him a few months back.
That's full circle.
Oh, I'm delighted he's here.
Hey, we should get Paul on the show.
I'm delighted that this community is not drawing barriers between international borders. It's wonderful.
Sure.
We're maintaining our friendships. That's the most important thing.
The mental flexibility around time zones is aside.
Time zones is a problem that I hope that we can solve in our lifetime. I don't know how, but
I think we're getting better at it. I think it's practice. We had a couple of times where we went, oh, hang on, because me being a day ahead most of the time, I have to check a date. Okay, which date? Where are we? But we're getting better at it.
We still managed to slot in an author from Japan, which
we did.
Was an improvement when we had Baptiste on.
Yeah, I think we had four. I think 4 countries. That's been our.
And we've been struggling to get somebody on Pacific time. That one's still tricky, and that's Andy, obviously. We'd love to have him, but we haven't worked it out just yet. We're going to, I promise.
Yeah, you nearly come back around again, would you?
I know. No, if there's for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Maybe ants. There's some goblins that I'm eventually going to base on ants, and maybe that will be the cannon fodder that I've been looking for this whole time. But even then,
go watch a movie called The Ant Bully.
Oh no! Back in my notebook.
The hose. It's a wonderful movie. Actually, Don was on the conceptual artists.
Oh, okay.
And working production art for it. Yeah, it's animated, but it's really a wonderful film. But
If
yeah,
I get,
saw it
I
on,
cannot.
go bully
I can't
the ants.
afford.
Go on, go on.
I can't afford sympathy for ants. My yard, the battle is ongoing constantly.
I saw the Ant Bully on the plane. It was a good plane movie. Very easy to watch.
Nice.
You would be astonished at what those ants cart away that you wouldn't like to see.
I believe it. I believe it.
All those things that die in your yard,
Yeah,
those ants pick apart and take away. It'd be pretty nasty to go walking out barefoot if you
I
didn't have
believe
ants.
it. But I also think they're not hurting as far as their population. I think I have more ants in my yard, possibly. No hyperbole, than there are people on Earth, and it's mainly a 1 acre stretch of grass in that direction, not the trees over here, but just. I mean, we don't do anything to control them other than I hit them with a lawnmower and watch them go. I can hear them going, ah! As they fly away. Otherwise, they're winning.
Well, look out because they outnumber you one day.
Oh, so much. And and I'll feed them. One day I will feed them, and everybody I know will. I know.
Well,
they'll get me back.
When you think about it, makes me think of what's the book I'm thinking of? Is it Adrian Tchaikovsky's I tell you, I lie. It was Michael Fletcher's he's one where they're all
Storm Beneath.
Oh yeah.
Storm Beneath, yes. Storm
Yeah.
Beneath. And it's no people, they're all insects. Basically it's insects, all these characters and it's a smart fantasy, but it's from an insect populate, they're sort of sentient insects, if you will. Which is there we go. As the insects shall inherit the earth. Yeah, we don't want to upset them too much. We're not going to win that battle.
I'll tell you this: Tchaikovsky's "Children of Time" was that the first book in the series?
Yes, that's the one I was thinking.
I've never had such a respect for jumping spiders until that book. Now I pick them up and look at them. Now if they're in the way, instead of going.
I love those little guys.
I love.
We used to have them all over the walls when we first moved here. And they don't make any webs. They just pounce on stuff and eats it.
But they can. They can jump off your hand.
Yeah, but they don't.
Like
they don't bother. They usually just jump.
They're
hunters.
Cool. They're out. They outsmart everybody.
The way they go sideways on the wall. I love those guys.
They talk with their whatchamacallits.
Yep. But I'm weird, so. Do you follow that guy that used to be on Twitter that photographed the Australian jumping spiders? Like incredible pictures.
Zoomed in, maybe
huge. I don't know his name. I followed him, but the photos of the spiders was just incredible.
Yeah, very, very iridescent looking spiders.
Yes, they were all Australian. He was an Australian photographer. I loved his stuff. My Twitter feed used to be all scientists until all his baloney blew up.
Yeah, it's a whole other story, isn't it?
All the new pictures of the Pluto flyby.
Oh,
all that stuff. There was just spectacular stuff that's what I logged in for, and then it turned into.
When I saw that footage, that when they released that initial footage on Mars, and think we're sitting here looking at real time footage from another planet, that's science fact. That's just I could watch that for hours,
Especially with
I'm still salty got downgraded.
Back in the day, a lot of the science fiction readers and the people who showed up at conventions were engineers at NASA. In fact, this shirt came from a guy who was literally a rocket scientist, gave me the shirt from NASA. So yeah, we were all in the middle of all that stuff, and some of the stories that they told from actually on the ground when that was all going on was just astonishing.
I'll be fascinating. Is that the detail and the thinking to create something, to go all those distances to land in the way it did, and that the margins for error, which are just one-eyed.
But yeah, the best of the internet was, literally you could contact those people and talk to them.
Yeah.
Biologists taught me how to run my camera traps here. The guys who actually did it in the field taught me how to set them up, how to do everything. That's all vanished under this massive heap of social media, whatever. But yeah, I miss that.
Yeah.
You could literally contact an expert on any subject and they would answer you.
Janny, I may have one more question. I thought I did. My mouse is dead, so I can't really scroll through my notes too super well. And I know it's getting late for the UK boys. It's getting early for Charlie, or getting less early for Charlie, I guess.
Less early, yeah. The time works the same way here as it does elsewhere, but
Okay. It doesn't go backwards down there.
I might be down under, but we don't know. I wish then I could reverse age, but
let me just make a note of that, so I won't make that mistake again, Charlie. No, if I had another one, it would just be simple. Anachronistic artist, you've referred to yourself. I guess your cover paintings, maybe. And this might have been a fleeting thing. This might not even end up being a thing. But in that AMA, you were saying some things that you're about. Anachronistic artist. Does that ring a bell? Does that
Anachronism?
Yeah,
Anachronistic artist. I work with traditional materials.
Okay.
I start with a bloody pencil and paper, and I draw with scribbles until I get what I want, and then I transfer it to a piece of masonite that I surface myself.
Okay.
And then I paint it in oils. Or back in the day, when I did some science fiction, it was sometimes acrylic, but I prefer oil now. So yeah, no digital.
I thought maybe that meant the guy in the painting behind you had a wristwatch or something like that.
No, it meant start with traditional. When I started as an artist, you needed just a box of paints and some pencils and some tracing paper. You didn't need all these electronics. You didn't need to digitize the work. You took it to a photographer who did that, and he shot film. You took your black and white and they shot film to send it to the printing press. And the printing press was offset. It wasn't digital. So you actually had a plate. They did a photographic plate, and then they rolled the drum and the pages came off as offset. And 4-color process did the paintings. There was no digital. So I still work the old way. And now I'm going to always work the old way, because now there's no way to prove. If I was a digital artist, there's no way to prove I didn't use AI.
Yeah.
Absolutely no way to tell.
yeah.
And, you know, it's starting to look very much like you can identify, oh, yeah, I've seen that mountain range from sky in this fantasy painting 100 times. You know, that wasn't drawn or imagined or conceptualized. It was pulled right out of a photograph, cut and pasted and added. So digital art has gotten very swipey. And I don't mind being inspired by, but I like to work with my imagination. I like to work with I draw my characters from my head.
Yeah.
I do too, but my drawings, I feel like they're on a different caliber than your drawings.
You have to do enough of them.
Oh, I've been drawing for a good little while, but never really focused, I guess.
You have to paint.
Well, see, when you take the painting and you hang it up next to Michael Whalen and all the Hugo
Then I'll
artists
see.
every week, you realize that you got to kick yourself in the pants a little harder and a little harder and a little harder. So you draw and then you lay yourself in alongside the masters. Now it's going to museums. And it's like, can you really draw the way Rembrandt drew? Not yet.
Not yet.
So you keep,
I think I like that. Not yet.
There's no use in comparing yourself to people who are more successful than you are, unless you're using it as a yardstick to stretch yourself bigger.
I was going to ask: would you see that as a aspiration? As in, you know, you can focus on like that's where I want to get myself to, perhaps, but not
right. You look at that guy and you go, "Man, I couldn't have drawn that." So what do I have to learn in order to be able to draw to that standard?
But there has to have been a point in time when Rembrandt couldn't draw like that or paint like that either. You know.
Well, that's about when you croak.
One can hope.
But also you realize some of those guys that were drawing back in those times, they didn't necessarily do all the work themselves. They probably had 14, 15 apprentices, young guys doing some of the scut work.
Yeah, that's true.
But nonetheless, there's always going to be a genius who's better than you. And I don't want to wake up the day that I don't see that, because that says I got nowhere to go.
Yeah.
Show me somebody who can write something I couldn't have written that makes me go, oh my God, I can learn from that. Show me the painting, show me the experience in life, show me the person who can teach me another facet of my humanity. Because if there isn't a mentor out there, then you decided you know everything, and where is there to go from that?
No way.
Yeah. Down.
Down.
Yeah. Or stop.
Rest.
So I thought, I think one fun thing to just close the show, we came up with this concept with Olivia Elliott a few episodes.
Yeah, you beat me to it. I was going to suggest that as well.
It's the brown paper bag quote for your book. Do you know what I mean, Janny? It's if your book was a blind date in the bookstore, how would you sum up your works? Maybe difficult for you because you have so many at this point.
So you pick one.
maybe the series.
Yeah.
Don't read my books if you don't want to have an experience you never had before.
Boom.
If you want the book that's going to interchange you with the character, where the edges are all sanded off, and you can be the character and you cannot have to leave your own envelope behind, don't read my books. Because they are going to make you experience something that you haven't. So you won't be able to walk in there with one eye shut and not be changed.
That's a good pitch too.
Yeah.
And sometimes you want a book like that, where you don't want to challenge your limits. You don't want to challenge your beliefs. You don't want to feel something that isn't your own feeling. You don't want to be in another character's shoes to the point where you can't relate to your own anymore. Sometimes you want a book like that because you need the break. So again, I'm not knocking books that have a generic tone to them where you can interject your own character over top of the book's experience. But my books are not going to allow that. And if you come in expecting that, you're going to get pissed really quick. Because it's going to make you feel something. You're going to be that character. You're going to have that character's experience. And you're not going to be able to bring your baggage along with you. Because if you do, it will blow that baggage up on the regular.
That's a great bridge.
Yeah.
Well, Janny Wurts, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you
for joining us.
What an honor.
Guys, I've had a blast. I've really had a blast. I'm sorry I didn't make a beard to fit in, but I've really had a blast.
No, I think we'll award you the honorary beard. You don't have to wear it.
For sure. Forevermore.
Added to many awards.
So it's been entirely my pleasure. So thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us, for sure.
So yeah, I hope we've blown up a few people's Friday the 13th and made it not what they expected in a good way.
I think so.
Sure we have. Yeah, definitely.
Thank you all for watching.
Yeah, everyone.
Thank you for joining us. Enjoy your weekends, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
In a couple of weeks.
You've been listening to the 4 Beardsmen of the Bookpocalypse. Like, share, subscribe for more.